a blue spark shot through the wire like it wanted to wake me up. It wasn't the first time the electrical system in my trailer had threatened to give out, but on that silent afternoon, I figured it'd be easier to ignore the smell of heated plastic than to face another makeshift repair. My name is Casey Turner, but for months even my own reflection didn't seem to recognize me. 38 years weighed on my back like a poorly kept secret in a land full of horizons, which, for me, used to be just a straight line, squeezed between the trees in my own small world. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. User interface designer. That's how I introduced myself the rare times I had to emerge from online anonymity or say something to my Colorado neighbors, more out of habit than vanity. But out here, far from the city buzz, my titles lost their meaning when only the wind and the birds could hear me. I carry a recent past made of starts and loose ends, a breakup with scars that imprinted their shape inside me, filtering my days with a tone of ironic distrust. Silence was my refuge. I built this small bunker on wheels myself, surrounded by pines, where everything answered to my will. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Before, I'd wake to frantic alarms, answering emails that glowed in the dark of my room. Now, it was just the gurgle of coffee brewing in the old coffee pot, the smell of fresh earth, and a blues playlist filling the space between my routine and an unfulfilled desire for something different, or someone different. I never liked parties, but I missed another voice on long nights, a companion within arm's reach when the world outside felt too big. My life was a picture of domestic predictability, where every piece had its place and nothing was out of order, except my own heart. I turned down invitations to meetings, barbecues at the Residents Association, and impromptu picnics by the lake. I preferred to keep my distance. Peace lives in control, I'd tell myself, even knowing it was just a way to avoid facing my most primitive fears, new beginnings, disappointments, or the risk of losing myself in someone else. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The complete, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check the link in the description right away. After so much persistence, loneliness had turned into a habit. A heavy piece of furniture in the middle of the room, impossible to ignore, impossible to move alone. And that's when the unexpected decided to show up, uninvited, messing with my meticulously protected routine. I can only say one thing. A current crossed my path and turned on every switch I had kept hidden. If you want to understand what happens when a spark turns into a fire, and how even the most shielded routines can melt in the face of the unpredictable, leave a like now, and don't forget to subscribe. The smell of Colorado gives no quarter to nostalgia. Each morning, a mix of pine resin and wet earth hit my window. The trailer, parked in the farthest corner of the community, was my private fortress. A rectangle with big windows, diffused light coming through the blinds, furniture I put together myself, a habit I picked up after years in apartments where nothing was truly mine. Early in the morning, the chirping of squirrels outside and the first sunlight streamed through the glass, shaking the last bits of sleep from me. That's when I appreciated the region's silence. No sirens, horns, or the human traffic of big cities. Just a world of leaves moving in the wind, branches swaying, the hiss of my coffee grounds being poured into the coffee pot. Every morning followed the same carefully crafted script. A strong cup of coffee, a quick look at phone notifications, the countdown to the next deadline, which, ironically, was usually just set for myself. In the corner of the living area was my wall-mounted desk, where I spread out circuit boards, USB cables, app prototypes, and a book on practical philosophy that was always closed. I'd worked remotely since before it was cool. I escaped the chaos to finally be able to hear my own footsteps on the floor. I was obsessive about my to-do lists. Each project divided into small blocks, lined up on colored sticky notes, affixed to a magnetic wall. During the day, the only interruption was the distant sounds of my neighbors doing their chores, someone mowing the lawn, Hank taking out the trash, or old Mrs. Jenkins' high-pitched laughter complaining about the gas delivery guy. In between online meetings, my hobby was trying to fix small household defects. The toaster that insisted on quitting, a flickering light in the hallway, or the battery-powered radio I inherited from my father. The microwave, though, was a whole other story. Every popped kernel was a test of patience and skill. The dry afternoon air, mixed with the scent of pine, invited me for a short walk to the trail behind the trailers. Yellow-breasted birds crossed my path, the ground covered in old leaves. It all gave a constant feeling of possible new beginnings, of choices made and remade. But, invariably, at the end of the day, I'd return to my programmed rituals, listing tomorrow's goals, heating dinner on the gas stove, and relaxing on the porch step, watching the light change on the horizon. At night, the trailer felt smaller but cozier. My mug collection spread out in the kitchen, a wool blanket thrown over the sofa bed. I lived alone, but without getting lost or giving myself the luxury of complaining. Everything was put in its place before bed, so nothing would surprise me the next morning, until fate decided this order no longer belonged to me. A short circuit doesn't choose a time or wait for convenience to cause damage. The clock read 3 in the afternoon. I was reviewing a new prototype on the computer, ready for another remote meeting, when the lights flickered in an indecisive ballet all over the trailer. A sweet and sour smell of heated plastic rose from the hallway panel. When the power went out for good, my pulse shot up with it. Not so much from the dark, but from the inevitable need to face analog reality again. I heard heavy footsteps outside, crunching on the gravel and coming up the small trailer stairs. Half of me wanted to keep the door shut, but before I could decide, someone knocked. 3 firm, intentional taps. I opened it slowly, and there he was. A tall man, broad but not ostentatious, with strong hands carrying a toolbox. His hair was short, a faint beard, an old oil-stained t-shirt, and a carefree smile. "Casey, straight from the rescue service," he said, holding up a worn badge in his left hand. "Looks like your panel called for help again." He spoke with the tone of someone who's seen it all, in no hurry to judge. "Nick Dawson, city electrician, an expert at fixing what time and neglect leave behind." I'd seen him in passing once or twice walking around the community, without ever exchanging more than a wave. He was part of the team that took care of the trailer's installations, but legend had it, he preferred to work alone. Now, the irony. Me, so diligent about avoiding contact, was forced to make space. Nick took off his safety glasses, quickly scanned the trailer's interior, and located the breaker box. As he opened covers and checked wiring, he let out random phrases about the dry Colorado weather, about the absurd number of potholes on the main road, about Mrs. Jenkins, who, according to him, always accidentally unplugs other people's stuff. With a relaxed gesture, he put the multimeter on the panel and commented, half laughing, "No wonder I've gone through more electrical tape this week out here than in my own apartment." I apologized for the state of the panel, almost apologizing for my own presence. He ignored it, continuing his work, making fun of the old microwave, asking if I'd ever thought about switching to electric pans for good, always laughing at my serious demeanor. I realized he had something rare, the ability to fill a room without invading it, talking about everything but asking for little in return. As he worked, his hands were always gentle, his eyes attentive to every detail, stopping only to comment on a game on local TV, the countless miles he'd driven chasing clients, and his peculiar taste for old radios. I listened more than I replied. I noticed an interesting contrast. Him coming from the practical world, solving tangible problems, me stuck in code, in invisible apps. But somehow, the distance was smaller than it seemed. Nothing at the beginning of that encounter suggested danger. Until then, we were just 2 strangers, fulfilling our roles in the domestic dramas of any community. Our interests, at least at first glance, orbited different galaxies. Me, a fan of technology and introspection. Him, devoted to a life off-screen, passionate about engines, machines, and small repairs. But it was easy to laugh at how Nick dealt with adversity. Every unforeseen event became a story, every obstacle a chance for him to show another improbable talent. There was no tension, no lingering eye contact, just 2 lives crossing like wires in the same junction box, without even sensing how tangled they would become in the days to come. By a stroke of fate, or just the neglect of my trailer's previous owners, the frequency of power outages increased. Nick, always available, reappeared effortlessly, always bringing new gadgets or repair tapes, eager to solve another riddle of domestic improvisation. He never came empty-handed. A homemade bread he got from his aunt, a pack of colored screws, or unusual information from some bizarre repair. Over time, professional visits gave way to shared tasks that weren't on the service list. Nick pointed out obvious flaws in the microwave, taught me how to keep the breaker from tripping just from using the toaster. Sometimes, after work, the excuse was to check the new transformer, but we'd end up sharing the same improvised meal. Scrambled eggs that stuck to the pan, sausages a little overcooked, cold beers as the sunset painted the sky red. It was in these mundane meetings, between fragments of conversation and unexpected laughs, that common ground appeared. We discovered together an unlikely affection for old radios. He the mechanic, me the digital guy. Once, we spent hours trying to figure out why the trailer's stereo had stopped working. The smell of burnt components, mixed with the scent of brewed coffee, marked that late afternoon. I told him about my fascination with movie soundtracks, and to my surprise, Nick, who seemed to be only about sports and trucks, also liked the same theme song from an old movie I loved. That made us laugh, like we shared a secret password. Between screw holes and badly made popcorn, he'd tell me about the trips he'd taken across the country, the small towns he worked in, the eccentric clients he'd collected. I shared funny stories from support chats, showed him weird app projects, and laughed out loud at the most absurd user requests. He called me the engineer of invisible things, and I called him the miracle electrician. We never rushed our time together. Silences happened, but they weren't awkward. Sometimes we'd just listen to the sound of the wind rustling the trees, sharing a piece of silence that, for some reason, liked being shared. Gradually, small kindnesses appeared in our daily lives. Nick would check the lights before leaving, leave his number for emergencies, or set up an extra chair on the porch, in case you decided to have company one day. I discovered that friendship makes little noise when it's born. It arrives slowly, infiltrating between silly tasks and mundane laughs, until it becomes part of the landscape. I caught myself more than once waiting for Nick to come, and when he did, I felt the house lit up differently. The road into myself was more potholed than any wiring Nick had ever tried to fix. I started to notice how each of his visits changed the rhythm of my days. A light anticipation, a nervousness camouflaged in a hurried tidying of the living room, the strange desire to get the eggs just right in case he showed up. The problem was my history. Scars had left behind unreliable maps. I saw in myself the constant fear of being fooled. One part of me wanted to move forward, to open up to any possibility of tenderness. Another retreated, distrusting intentions, watching for any approach that might seem too invasive. The fear of repeating myself, of investing in something that would fall apart at the first stumble, pushed against any initiative. My walls, built with such care, were still there, as resistant as ever. Nick, for his part, had his own past dragging chains on his ankle. Some nights, after a few beers, he'd share stories of loss, broken partnerships, friendships that couldn't withstand distance, loves that evaporated from pure inertia. He'd reveal sad smiles, like someone who had seen many doors close without understanding why. Yet, he seemed more willing to take a risk than I was, maybe from the habit of picking up his tools again, of facing every malfunction as an invitation to repair. Outwardly, the world wasn't helping much. August brought dry storms, power outages became chronic, and with them a flood of complaints from the neighbors. Hank would get on my case, blaming my trailer for the chain blackouts. Mrs. Jenkins, paranoid, started putting labels on all her outlets to prevent energy theft. The community turned into a small circus of disputes, and Nick was called constantly. The problem with being too good at what you do. Between electrical emergencies and environmental tensions, I saw Nick more and more. The external pressure mixed with the internal. I felt things were shifting, a routine that was no longer just mine. The challenge wasn't just fixing the microwave or surviving Hank's jokes, but accepting that the improbable had a name and a 5 o'clock shadow, and was in my backyard every week. The fear of moving forward, mixed with the latent desire for something new, alternately pushed me and held me back. Each visit from Nick was an invitation and a warning at the same time. Either I changed, or I'd stay stuck in the same old loops. And it was on this tightrope between the old and the possible that my defenses began to give way, a little at a time. Little did I know the most electric days were still to come. Those dry, hot days always triggered my anxiety. August felt like an animal perched on top of a mountain, looking at each of the trailers as if it would blow them away at any moment. The electrical grid was already unstable, wavering like an old man's mood. But on that particular afternoon, in a rare surprise, everything was working fine. The other residents were gathered far away, at a kind of makeshift bazaar in a vacant lot across the road. All that remained was the wind hitting the trailer, some parakeets calling out in the trees, and the distant chatter, muffled by the distance. I had tried to fill my time with useless tasks, but my head seemed stuck in a kind of quiet alert, an expectation I wouldn't even admit to myself. The microwave, as usual, refused to cooperate. I finally gave up, slamming the door harder than I intended. The metallic sound echoed in the empty trailer. I sat on the makeshift porch, a cold beer resting on the sun-faded wood. and let the breeze push me forward. It was then, almost by chance, that I saw Nick coming up the gravel path, slow steps, a water tank in the back of his truck, a gray t-shirt stuck to his sweaty body. He smiled before he even got there. He brought a toolbox with him, but he looked relaxed. Apparently, there was no emergency, at least, none involving wires or outlets. He said hello, sat down beside me, and leaned the box at his feet. I figured a little shade would be better than all that commotion down there, he confided, almost whispering, as if our little space were a sacred place. We talked idly for minutes that evaporated, laughing at Mrs. Jenkins's gossip, Hank's quirks, the cats that always seemed to multiply. Nick took a piece of lightness from the routine with every phrase. And it was different now, because that defensive urgency was no longer between us. My body relaxed, as if it knew everything was finally home. In a pause in the conversation, Nick rested his beer glass on his chin, looking at the horizon as if searching for courage. I felt my own heart sink into my chest, as if something were about to happen. And it did. He turned his body toward me, closer than before, and the words were lost in a transparent silence, filled only by the rustling of the trees around us. We stayed there, looking at each other, as if some silent password was being transmitted. It was unlike anything I had ever felt. There was no rehearsal, just that certainty pulsating between our skin that what was to come was inevitable. The contact began when his hand, rough from living in the material world, slowly touched my forearm, sliding up high enough to take my breath away, low enough to seem natural. The touch almost apologized as it arrived, but it stayed there, lingering as if experimenting with the newness of it all. The warmth of the touch rose and, for a second, all I could pay attention to was the smell of dirt, sweat, and woody cologne coming from him. My body didn't give me a warning when it started to respond. I only noticed because I turned slightly toward him, almost instinctively, closing the distance. Something in the way his eyes framed me, attentive and gentle, brought security. There was no room for hesitation, only desire. Nick's fingers brushed mine, and, without a word, he let out a wry, almost embarrassed smile. I think if it had been anyone else, I would have run or changed the subject. But this situation seemed suspended from gravity, as if it were just the two of us in that universe. The words slid to the bottom of the conversation, making way for small, peaceful gestures. I stayed there, floating in time and space, while the energy growing between us silently suggested that our days had changed course without warning. The moment between desire and movement is a place where hours stick together. I felt the heat of Nick's hand slowly advancing up my arm, mapping the path like someone learning a new language. He leaned in, bringing his face close, and the whole world seemed to pause. I felt his breath mixing with mine, heavy and anxious, trying to stabilize that moment of peaceful danger. When our lips met, there was first a tense delicacy, as if both were testing the ground. It wasn't haste. It was a study. And also, maybe, gratitude. The kiss started shy, warm, soon transforming into a wordless invitation to continue. His fingers navigated the back of my neck, pulling gently, as if dismantling the last barriers between intention and gesture. The touch turned into a path, and when I realized it, we were already on our feet, our bodies fitting together in the slow entrance of the trailer door. That small, familiar space, once so mine, suddenly gained temperature, low light, and promises. Nick shed his shyness little by little, and his hand, firm like someone used to building and repairing the world, ran over my skin with the delicacy of someone appreciating something precious. There was no noise, just the security of sharing silence and desire. The embrace grew tighter, the heat rising like steam from a kettle, spreading a pleasant numbness inside. His hands slid firmly but also with modesty, testing limits, investigating paths. My body adapted to his, fitting in and dismantling old fears. The smell of sweat, deodorant, and wood mixed with the sound of our movements. Each heavy breath was an invitation for another approach. At a certain point, it was as if time had folded. There, between the trailer walls, each touch happened as if it were new. Nick slowly laid me on the narrow couch, our legs finding a rhythm. The space was small, and squeezed our universes against each other until they became one. Our shirts came up, then slowly down, colors and textures differentiating our skin until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. His eyes never left mine for a second. The way he looked at me was different from anything I'd ever experienced. No dominance or embarrassment, just a respectful curiosity and a silent request for reciprocity. My hand went to meet his, our fingers interlacing, firming that silent, wordless alliance. Nick's movements resembled an experienced operator connecting a complex circuit, respecting the tension of each wire. We went together, navigating the unknown, a rhythm born more from our gazes than our bodies. With each revealed inch of skin, new landscapes appeared. Goosebumps lit up like lights inside my body, radiating a heat that seemed to come from the floor itself. Nick's scent enveloped me. Sweat, earth, a metallic touch from his daily work. And suddenly I wanted more. I wanted all of that moment. Time seemed to multiply, cut between sighs and drawn-out kisses, hands seeking new paths. Sometimes he'd stop and laugh softly, maybe at the awkwardness, maybe at the surprise of seeing desire turn our eyes into mirrors of each other. Every touch was a discovery. A button pressed, a wire energized, and then small sparks would race inside, making my skin vibrate. The feeling was like finally finding the right fit after so long searching for loose pieces. The heat of his body under mine, our mixed breath, the unforeseen synchrony of our gestures, all this became a new kind of conversation, a language that, to be spoken, you only had to close your eyes and listen. We remained intertwined for long moments, each of us feeling the other give in a little more without fear of being left behind. For an impossible-to-measure amount of time, we were just compressed energy between arms and legs, sweat dripping, breath paused, spasms of soft laughter in the midst of the bliss. There was no anguish or expectation, just the silent pleasure of knowing that in that corner, on that afternoon, our paths had crossed with honesty. When the intensity receded, we stayed there together, glued, still trembling, our breathing slowing down, our bodies recognizing a new calm. I felt that something had changed inside me. Some lock had given way, letting an old, almost forgotten current of trust flow. For several minutes, we remained in quietude, bodies glued, hair tangled, and breathing echoing between the trailer walls. I looked at the open window, saw the leaves dancing with the gentle wind outside, and finally understood why I missed silence so much. It was the blank space where I could, safely, draw new possibilities. Nick's touch on my hand didn't lose its strength. He held it firmly, but without hurry, as if to say that this didn't need translation or promises. There, everything seemed lighter. My stubborn thoughts, the inflexible routine, even the fear I fed without realizing it. I turned my face slowly and looked at him. The way he smiled, a little shyly, was an invitation to continue being vulnerable. The atmosphere after our encounter wasn't one of urgency, but of gentle contentment. Nick stood up with a calm gesture, picked our shirts off the floor, tossed one to me, and put on his without rushing, like someone who already belonged in that space, even if it was just for one more afternoon. We went to the tiny kitchen to make a second pot of coffee, sharing small tasks without much talk. The way he heated the water, looked for the right mug, and cleaned the counter with slow movements revealed a newly created intimacy, an ability to fit into my mess. We sat side by side on the porch railing, the sun already setting, painting everything in a golden light. I joked about my messy hair, and he pretended to analyze my confused way of stirring the spoon in the mug. We laughed slowly, without euphoria. The town was breathing outside. In here, the world was just ours. While drinking coffee, I realized with a new clarity that I was no longer trapped in the same cycle of old doubt and caution. The intimate moment had broken through me and opened a door to forgotten places, as if it had restored a part of a trust I thought I'd lost forever. I felt my shyness give way to a quiet pride. I didn't have to hide anything about myself, or put up defenses. The following days revealed nuances of this new space between us. The routine, once so strict and impermeable, now adapted to pleasant surprises. A message in the middle of the morning with a photo of a broken outlet, emergency, an unexpected visit just to share a beer or bring fresh bread he bought on the way. At night, I started waiting for the sound of his truck outside, a sound that used to mean nothing, now filled me with a calm anticipation. Over time, other things changed. I started leaving things out of place, open to the possibility of Nick moving them. Conversations became longer, deeper. We talked about habits, quirks, family, losses. Nick opened up about past traumas, about the eternal feeling of not quite fitting in anywhere. I confessed my failures, admitted my fears. In some way, our flaws fit together, and it became clear that nothing had to be perfect to be real. It didn't take long for the internal change to show on the outside. I started breaking out of the trailer routine, accepted invitations, tried to socialize more with neighbors. Hank no longer seemed so grumpy. And even Mrs. Jenkins came down from her paranoid pedestal to comment on the different good moods she saw in me. I realized that this encounter redefined my limits for what truly matters: sharing, presence, patience. In the dim light of the early evenings, when we lay together, the feeling was like entering a new house, a place I recognized, but that took on different contours with another person there. More concerning than the fear of losing him now was just the desire to build something. And between these walls, tested by time, loneliness, and now desire, I realized it was possible to trust again. Even if the world outside still held storms and fears, maybe the word is reconciliation, or reinvention. The truth is, I only understood freedom when I saw that I deserved to let someone in. Nick, with his robust, patient way and full of complete gestures, brought a simple light, installed in old wiring, but ready for new currents. I never looked at that trailer the same way again. The place, once just a backdrop for escape, now reminded me of possibilities. I was different, and the energy that flowed between us served as a reminder. Sometimes all it takes is a spark to redesign all the interior circuits. Summer showed signs of fatigue as soon as September began to paint the tree leaves in golden and red tones. It was as if the landscape wanted to slowly announce that life was changing seasons, inside and out. As the weeks passed, the relationship between me and Nick seemed to follow the same mature rhythm of cooler mornings. Still warm, but now arousing silent questions, veiled decisions, calculated movements between the desire to stay and the fear of moving too far ahead. One day, Nick arrived with a closed expression, one he rarely wore. I parked my notebook to the side, closed the trailer door behind me, and just one look was enough to know that something was about to be redrawn. We sat side by side on the porch, our mugs already lukewarm in our hands. He kept turning the rim of the cup, quiet, carefully measuring each word before letting its weight cross the air. "Casey, I got a job offer. One of those that pays better and gives you a new work truck in another town," he said, without beating around the bush, looking at the horizon. "It's 2 hours from here, not far, but it's outside the routine." The announcement sounded like an unexpected lightning bolt in an autumn sky. The silence that followed was dense, loaded with unspoken meanings. In a few sentences, he planted in me the fear of a goodbye. I couldn't hide my insecurity. I felt my throat tighten, my hands seeking refuge in my pockets. "Do you want to go?" The question escaped before I could control the tone. Nick took a deep breath, taking a little longer to answer. "I don't know. I know I need new challenges. But for the first time in years, I also want to stay. I want to try to build something, not just fix other people's problems. But you can't ignore the bills, you know? My options have never been many." With each new word, subtext took over the room. His desire to stay, my fear of holding someone back or being left halfway. I saw a reflection of my past self there, always ready to leave before being abandoned. But this time, more than fear, there was a different impulse. The impulse to ask him to stay. The next few days passed slowly, filled with small doubts. Every simple gesture, the way Nick arranged his tools, the careful way he made coffee, even his clothes left on the chair, seemed to carry the weight of a possible goodbye. But along with the uncertainty, affection grew. A more present care in the details, a longer hug, the explicit desire to enjoy every second together, as if we both felt an invisible countdown running in the background. One morning, after a difficult night where I got little sleep and mentally went over everything I wanted to say, I woke up determined not to waste any more time with assumptions. I made coffee, tidied up the makeshift porch, and waited for Nick to come back from the round he occasionally made through the neighboring trailers. When he showed up, tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but still open to the world, I sat down next to him as always. Only this time, without detours or subterfuge. I held his scarred hands, took a deep breath, and confessed, my voice still raw with emotion. "Nick, I don't want you to go. Not like this. Not without first knowing how much you've changed me. You've transformed the way I see this place. My own silence got better with you in it." I felt my eyes sting, but I didn't look away. "I understand the needs, the fear of routine turning into a trap, but I want you to know, if you decide to stay, I'll fight to make it worth it." Instead of an immediate answer, he rested his forehead on mine, closed his eyes, and let the weight of everything escape there. We stayed like that for a long time, breathing together, listening to the wind rustle the leaves outside. When he pulled away, he smiled, that smile that always takes down my walls, and said, "I've never stayed anywhere, Casey. I've always left before the mess started. But with you, I feel like staying to see what we can build. For the first time, I feel like not running away. The decision didn't come like in the movies, with dramatic tears and whispered vows. It emerged in small, practical details. I started to see Nick rearranging his tools in a corner of my closet, putting his toothbrush next to mine, tidying the fuse box as if it were a natural extension of home. The job offer was turned down by email, without fanfare, like someone closing one door just to open a bigger one. The following days had the taste of things falling into place. The fear of loss gave way to a mature hope. We started to share even more tasks, adjusting silences, small quirks, and everyday imperfections. I learned to make space in my tough sides for another presence, not as a guest, but as a full participant in all the routines. Nick, now lighter, truly gave himself to the daily rituals, late afternoon walks, household repairs, the long showers after work. The community soon noticed the difference. Hank asked, a little taken aback, if Nick wasn't traveling too much. Jenkins noticed that the light in my trailer didn't flicker as much. Even Nabley, the neighborhood's gray cat, started sleeping frequently on our doormat, as if he knew that spot had become a place of comfort. Despite the serenity, there was an inevitable moment of goodbye. Not to Nick, but to the version of myself that lived preparing for abandonment. I realized, between one morning and another, that accepting this love, even with all its risks and challenges, was a great gesture of permanence. A silent commitment to who I wanted to be from then on, without armor or masks. In the gloom of a warm evening, I sat next to Nick and said, with renewed tranquility, "I guess we made our own short circuit, huh? Two guys, each with their own internal electrical mess, who come together and create light. Who'd have thought?" He just laughed, squeezed my shoulder and murmured, "Yeah, sometimes a spark is all you need to get out of the dark." And, in that instant, I understood that it was no longer about staying or leaving, but about building a home together, physical and emotional, capable of withstanding any power outage or storm to come. Today, when I look out the trailer window and see the world outside slowly, I realize how much everything has been reconfigured. My corner, once a stage for loneliness and meticulously planned routines, now buzzes with the good unpredictability of a shared life. Nick brought, in addition to the repairs and electrical fixes, a new kind of order. The one that arises when someone shares their chaos and, instead of fixing everything, learns to live with you among the loose wires, the lights and shadows of everyday life. Our home has become an extension of what we created together. The strong smell of coffee in the kitchen mixes daily with the aroma of techniques learned from Nick. Machine oil for creaking doors, the smell of sawdust on Sundays spent on home projects, the scent of cheap soap after long showers when it gets dark early outside. Now, there are photographs scattered on the wall, notes exchanged in unlikely places. "Don't forget to turn off the stove, I love you." And even a makeshift clothesline hung next to the microwave. Yes, still rebellious, but now a source of laughter, never anger. And it wasn't just the house we changed. It was the ways of feeling, the desire to offer shelter, the understanding that you don't have to lose yourself to give yourself. I feel a lightness in the new routine. Sharing the blanket on cold nights, listening to the podcasts he recommends, teaching Nick how to use apps and learning from him how to replace the shower heater. Time began to be measured differently, not by the loneliness between endless meetings, but by the comfort of pauses together, by the comfortable silence of those who no longer need to prove anything. Sometimes fear still appears, nudges me gently, tries to say that tomorrow might hold new goodbyes. But it's a smaller, more disciplined fear now. I know that loss is part of it, that life messes with fate whenever it deems necessary. But I also know that courage is trusting enough to open the door, accept the light, and no longer be content with just the safe zone of predictable things. Now I look back and see how much I've grown. I accepted transforming my routine. I let go of old beliefs about what it would be like to love and be loved after 38. I learned that there's no age to start over, that everyone deserves, at some point, to feel that their place is less in things and more in connections. Nick brought renewed energy, but also the will to reinvent myself, to create roots, even where there was only a passage. With every challenge we faced together, from electrical crises to internal storms, it became clearer that home is made of details. Not the furniture, but the small decisions to stay. Looking at my reflection in the window, today I see less worry and more hope. The past is still there, marked in the inflamed scars of my soul, but no longer dictating the story. Now, I find comfort in knowing that I can fall asleep to the sound of Nick's breathing next to me and wake up with the certainty that, for however long it lasts, every risk, every fear, every choice to share what was once only loneliness was worth it. What you're hearing here is just the beginning. The complete, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check the link in the description right away. Deep down, the relationship has become its own electrical system, full of tangled wires, improbable contacts, small short circuits, and many restarts. But it's this imperfection that makes everything work, that casts light where there was once only waiting. If you've made it this far, if you felt the truth running under the words, be a part of this journey. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share this story with someone who needs to believe that regardless of age, everyone can be surprised by a new spark. And stay with me. Every week, I promise to light you up with more stories of courage, encounters, and new beginnings. This time, I'm not running away. I'll be waiting for you in the next chapter.